Wow, exciting video. Thank you, Francois. This is an amazing event. I didn't know about it, but it's 10 years old, which is always a good sign. It's not like a baby, and it's not a teenager. So that's good for me. I want to thank the conference organizers for accepting my unusual request, which is I'd like you to ask questions, any question you like, now, and I will stop the presentation to answer your question. Why? It's because there's this thing called YouTube. You can watch videos of myself saying all kinds of things, but you might have a question. But you can't ask it to me because I may have gone somewhere else and your brain has gone somewhere else. So if at the moment you have a question, go ahead and ask it. I will be flipping back and forth between questions and the presentation, if that's okay with you. It's a bit unusual, but I've found it's very effective because all of you have chosen to sit in these seats and you want some kind of value. And you can hope that my presentation gives you value. But the best way is to ask for it, and sometimes I can achieve that. Okay? Good. All right. So, first of all, thank you. Keep them coming in, and I will get to them. All right. So, first of all, when you think about leadership, what I find is that sometimes we think of it as something traditional. In the talks I've been watching and also viewing on Twitter, it's all about radical transformation. I don't believe that if you are a leader of an old company, you get to do radical transformation because it's just too hard. And when people from the new world tell you you're not trying hard enough, you feel terrible. And you say, why don't I leave my company? But in reality, you have to feed your families. So you can't leave so easily. So how do you cope with this is a question. Now, the reason why we talk about this so much is because of this idea, Moore's Law. And I've heard it said to me many times over the last few decades, but now I understand it very differently. It's a fundamental change in how the world has happened, and it took a long time for us to feel it. You know, Moore's Law, the simple idea, not a physical law, that the number of transistors will double every 18 months. Since the 70s. And so when you think about it, doubling is a special thing, especially if it happens every 18 months. And when you double something over a large number of times, what happens is the number gets big very fast. But it takes a while for you to experience that. So think about how computers have gotten so much faster, right? But they've also gotten cheaper. So when you think about how this is linear in log time, computers, in terms of how much they cost per transistor, has gone down too, which is a bit strange. So thinking about that, what I want you to look at is these takeaways. First of all, one moment, I'll get to this question right after this. 3 takeaways. The first takeaway is framing today in the Moore's Law is helpful. It's because it is not a normal period we're living in, where things have gotten faster every 18 months. Think about how the computer in 1970, the computer today is 2 billion times faster, but cheaper. This is impossible, but it's happened, and we live in that world. The second thing is if you are in what I call an end-up, you know, a startup is very exciting, but an end-up is an old company. You've an end-up. Sounds terrible, but it's actually quite good. It means you ended up successful. So how does it end up that is successful? Learn from startups is very important because startups all want to become end-ups. The third thing is it's taken me a long time to realize this, but design is not about beauty. It's not about aesthetics. It's about inclusion. By including different people into your work, what happens is something amazing happens, which is the impact of your business increases. If you include people that are not like yourself, you effectively expand your total addressable market. I think the problem today is when we talk about diversity and inclusion, it sounds like social justice, which is very important. But I want you to frame how you think of inclusion as a business case. If I want to increase my market, I have to be more inclusive. Can I go to questions now? And I have a whole presentation to prove each of these to you, but it won't matter if I don't include you in what you're wondering. So, new leadatories, mandatory young leaders? No. No. As you know, young people are kind of stupid sometimes. Old people too, they're both stupid, so they're not, there's nothing guaranteed. The favorite thing I heard in my 30s was a young man saying to me how he was giving a toast, and the toast was very profound. The toast was, when you're young, you're always told that you have potential. You have such great potential. But when you're older, you're told, you did such great things in the past. Such great things in the past. And he said that the key to life is no matter how old you get, is for anybody to tell you that you have potential. That, I think, is the key. Next question. Are all people able to practice simplicity? No. If you're a parent, no. You know how like the younger couples have the beautiful apartments, the white furniture, it's elegant, there's no mess, right? Simplicity. But if you're a parent, it's a mess, right? It looks chaotic, and people look at you, the young people look, oh, you don't know simplicity. And say, no, I'm a parent, right? So, it depends. Next question. Is costed design a good idea? I don't know what that means, but I will say that there's two views of design. One is design is a cost, one is design is an investment, okay? You know what marketing is the same way. Marketing can be seen as a cost, it can be seen as an investment. I will say that both design and marketing are a kind of overhead to product development. That said, today, the product is primarily experience. And if the product is experience, then marketing and design is part of the product now. So it's an important reframing. Next question. Is leadership always compatible with artistic thinking? No, it's not. No. Think of all the artists you would never trust with your money. Do you know? You're in France. Some of these people, don't give them any money. They'll never give it back to you. But some of them exhibit unusual risk-taking capability. And it is this risk-taking capability of an artist that is not different from an entrepreneur or not different from an intrapreneur, someone who's inside a company who's able to take risks and be inventive. So, next question. Are soft skills becoming new hard skills? I don't know. I think that soft skills have always been important, right? I think the hard skills looked important because, so who has an MBA? I have an MBA. Who has an MBA? MBA? So MBA, right. So what do you learn with your MBA? Primarily hard skills. 90% of the courses are hard skills. The 10% is soft skills. But all good managers know that what makes them a good leader is all soft skills. So it's more a problem of this business of Harvard Business Review. Do you know this business? The 10 ways to, or the 3 triangles, or it's all these like hard skills. It's not true. Next question. Do you imagine that design spirit and especially design thinking must reach all? No, don't give it to the CFO. The CFO should count the money and keep everything on track. They shouldn't be creative. But any other part of the company should adopt some lateral thinking, some innovative thinking. Why? Because of Moore's law. Because Moore's law means that change happens anywhere from 1 to 2 years from now. Twice the amount of change is happening. So if you work in product, if you work in any area of the company that's producing things, you have to adopt some creative frame of mind. Next question. What is the mission? What is missing to the CIO to succeed? The CIO can mean so many things. There's the Chief Information Officer, the Chief Innovation Officer. If it's a Chief Innovation Officer, that's their job. Good luck. If it's a Chief Information Officer, this is the most interesting job today, I think, because it was traditionally seen as the most boring part of the company. IT, bad, right? The IT people stopped me from installing this. The IT person, you know? But it's changed because IT drives everything. There isn't anything that isn't touched by IT. So if you are a CIO, it's a very important time. But if you are a classical enterprise CIO that still believes that the world has not changed, that I like IBM mainframes, I wish for this day, then you probably should be fired. So rethink yourself if you're a CIO, because your field is changing the fastest. And thus, it's the most exciting, and it's important to sell inside your company this kind of excitement instead of compliance. Because I think in the IT industry, we look for compliance. But as we know, as we were talking about soft skills and hard skills, right? Soft skills is not about compliance. Hard skills believes compliance is possible, right? Okay. Should we design leadership or lead design? This is a beautiful question. I will say you should do both, because leadership has to change in some way. I think many of the speakers are talking about it, but many of them are not stuck leading people. Who leads over 100 people right now? Right? Is it easy? No, right? It's not simple. It's not a simple task to lead over 100 people, but most leadership experts don't lead anything. Have you noticed? Yeah, you noticed that, right? Yeah, she's laughing, right? It's weird. So anyways, back to, thank you. Keep setting more questions. Okay, again, these 3 takeaways, and you can have your lunch or dinner, and it'll be okay. But again, do you see how you are more smart than I am? Because you have questions. And some of you had questions but weren't sure what to ask. So you're all cooperating together. You are the organism of learning. I'm just a tool in the process, a lens for all of you. So keep sending in questions. Okay. First point, Moore's Law. Why do I know about Moore's Law intimately? It's because I grew up with computers. I had this Macintosh. Who had a Macintosh in 1984? Wow, old people, right? Old people. There were the settlers, the pioneers. You know, it was a computer that did nothing. It was just useless, right? There was no internet, nothing. Okay, but it was an important era because computers were still coming to be, and you had to write software to be able to use a computer. So many people from that era are advantaged because they lived through the beginning of Moore's Law's impact on consumers. Those of you who are newer to computing, you actually have a difficult time because you're living on 20 years of progress. And a lot happened in those 20 years. I know when I worked in Silicon Valley, I would meet many young people who would tell me, I have this amazing idea. This idea where you put a camera on your body and it tracks things and blah, 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 blah. And I would tell them, oh, I saw this 20 years ago. No, that's impossible. It's brand new. Or like, I have this amazing idea. I'm going to put some like displays on my face. It's incredible. And I said, oh, I saw that 30 years ago. That's impossible. It's new. So the nice thing about having this perspective is good. The bad thing is that you believe that you are right. That happened, but it never took off. So I want to keep in mind that what's great about having history is you have context. What's bad about it is that you believe yourself. This is point 3 of the presentation, that the reason why you have to be inclusive is because as you get smarter, you get dumber. And so if you're an older person who doesn't use Snapchat because that's what the kids use, you should use it because there's some fantastic ideas in it, right? If you are a younger person who believes that Snapchat will beat Google someday, you should try out Microsoft Word version 1. to experience the brilliance of that system as well, because there were a lot of good ideas all across the way. And only by working inclusively can you find these perspectives. So I was lucky because I was good at computing and good at art. And so much of my career was spanning the art and the programming. And I made a name for myself in the early 1990s as a person who could do both. And as someone who could do both, I was rare. I remember my teachers told me that, wow, you're so amazing. You know, only you can do this. But that's not good. Because if you're the only one good at something, you don't know if you're good or not. So my teachers in Japan told me that I must make new students who can do this kind of work that I do. So one day, they can come and destroy me. So I did that, and they all destroyed me. But at MIT, I recruited many people to understand computers because at the time, I was curious about computers, and I would make different examples of computers. This was in the 1993. It was a human-powered computer. And this is the paper floppy disk. And this is the disk drive person. And she's wearing the floppy disk to take data off the disk to pass to the bus. And the computer bus has arrived, and the data gets passed around. But these were ways I wanted to see the computer, to understand the spiritual aspects of the computer. And she's now checking the mouse position, the XY position. So anyways, these were things that I made to understand the computer. In the 90s, when the web browsers were first emerging, I would make these things in Java. I would make all these graphics that were very hard to make. But as I said, much of my work was spent on education, to educate people who could do this kind of work that I did. And so I stopped making a lot of this art and design. I won many awards. And once I went to the White House, I quit because I knew I couldn't do anything anymore. And I began focusing on this question of computing. Computing because I'd experienced it change. And I noticed something, and this was something, and I would notice it through different people. This is something that Scott Heiferman, the CEO of Meetup, once said to me. He said, before the television, you had this idea called the coffee table. It was a piece of hardware. And you would sit around it, and you drink coffee, and you talk to each other. Right? An amazing device. And then after the TV, you would all look at the TV like a fireplace. And you wouldn't look at each other. You're looking at the TV. So you're all positioned that way. And then in the age of the computer, you finally had your own TV. And suddenly the living room looked like this, where everyone has their own TV. You know, they're all free. But as you know, today, we now live in the era of mobile, where everyone has a TV and they're shining it in their face. And they're walking around at the same time. So this has all happened in just a matter of a few decades. Only 20 years, and this transformation has happened. And as we know, the next phase is it's on our face. So a lot of change has happened. Now, why is it important to think about this? It's because when you think about the computer, in the old days, those who had a Macintosh in the 1980s remembered email. And email was something you would do 2 times a day. You'd wake up in the morning, you'd turn the computer on, you'd run whatever, Eudora or whatever, you'd see the mail. You'd respond to it. Then you'd go back to your life. Remember that, right? And then you'd go, maybe at nighttime, you're a hard worker. You would turn on the computer, check your email. And so why is this important? It's important because the number of people who could use a computer was very small. Number 2, there wasn't a lot of email. Number 3, the email software did not have to feel good. It didn't have to feel good. It was a painful experience to use email, right? But that's okay, because it's only 2 times a day. It's what I call 2 ouches. Ouch. Ouch, right? But in the era of the mobile phone, we keep checking mail, checking messages, right? And so what happens is, could you switch back? One last slide. In this era of mobile, what happens is we're always checking email all the time. So what happens is, if you unlock your phone 150 times, it will ouch all day long if you use the old email systems. So when we ask ourselves, why does user experience matter now? It's because we do not tolerate ouch all day long. So anyone who comes from the old era of IT will say, what are you complaining about? I used this email system 20 years ago. It works fine. But the new people don't want to ouch, number one. And the new people are used to having great experiences delivered over their mobile phone. So they don't want your ouch. They want good experiences. That's why design has become so important today. Let's switch to questions. Switch to questions. Magic. Thank you. OK. So, do we still need leaders? Shouldn't we learn to do without them? I don't believe that. You know, there are many people who will market to you the solution is to have no leaders, and let's use software and chaos and machine intelligence and all this stuff. This is a wonderful idea. If it happens, I think it'll be an unhappy world, because we like to learn, and we also can smell. You know, smell. This nose, it smells thing. You know, we smell with our brain. And we want to smell something real. And we learn best when we trust somebody. So who trusts somebody in their life? Who trusts? OK, many mistrusters in this room. But those of you who trust someone, you trust them with so much. You trust them with your personal details. You trust them with your professional insecurities. You've smelled them a lot. Because sometimes, you know, those who trust people know that sometimes someone will mistrust you. When someone takes your trust and tears it up and throws it to the ground, it's a terrible feeling. Who has lost trust in someone? Come on, lost trust, right? Oh, everyone, come on. It's everyone, or else you don't go outside your house. Losing trust is terrible. The problem with a machine or these random or organizational hacks is you don't know who to trust. You don't know who to smell. So you're not going to really do your best work, right? Like if a machine told you every morning, do this and do this and do this, you're like, OK, I'll do it. You're not going to get excited about it. But if it's someone you trust who has an idea, and you've been in their place before, you are now going to give them your followership and your 100%. And something is going to happen. So we need this human element to be inspired as people. Yes, the machines can trick us to think they're humans. But once we know they're not human, why listen to them? That's against freedom. Like, I love talking to Henry over there. He has a camera, you know, and it has like a dolly for the video. And what's interesting is that his dolly, you know how they have machine-controlled dollies? You know, where you press the button, you know, have you seen these cameras move side to side with a robotic thing? He also has a dial. But I noticed he likes to use his hand. And he uses his arm. And why does he use his arm? He can put emotion in it. He cannot move 0.001 milliseconds perfectly, right? A robot's good at that. But he can immediately say, oh, over there, or over there, very quickly. This is the power of human beings, I believe. Next question. How do you get people on board when leadership is redesigned every 18 months? Very simple. So this was an idea that I read about a Nobel laureate, Arnaud. He was a Nobel physicist. And he ran Bell Labs. And he talked about how one of our fallacies of our wisdom is we think that large organizations are terribly inefficient. The larger you get, the dumber it gets, because it's all this like people there, right? And how do I move kind of thing. But I loved, as a physicist, he described it in a new way that I hadn't heard of. He described how if you're a molecule, if you're a bigger molecule, you have a better chance of making an impact. Because a bigger molecule has larger surface area. It's touching the world. So I reason that the problem with large organizations is when their molecule is large and the surface area is small, but they spend all their time inside the molecule. So I would argue that it is easy to redesign leadership, move people faster, if everyone is facing the world. If they're all facing inside, you have strong inertia, strong forces, like, hey, did you talk to Amy? Oh my gosh, you have to talk to Amy. Like, did you talk to Chris? No, you didn't talk to Chris. I got Chris. And everyone's talking about this internal world. Whereas, if you're standing there talking to the customer, and the customer says, I hate you. Oh, that hurts, you know? So, oh, you hate me. I better get moving. I can't hide in the molecule. So who knows this? Who loves to work with customers, right? There is nothing better than working directly with customers, even though it takes so much time. The reason you work with customers is not to be a good person. It's to be an effective person in an organization. It is how you unlock the ability to be inclusive of their viewpoint. It's kind of like how I used to speak all the time and answer questions at the very end. But I wasn't inclusive of all of you. So by being inclusive, I can find more parts that you need right now and not be a blah, blah, blah. Okay, next question. The only limit is talent. How to convince leaders to hire better talents themselves? Wow, that's a great question. Let's see. How do you do that? I don't know how to do that. I have no idea. I try all the time to get people to become less, maybe that's how I do that. Okay, so one thing I try to do is I try to make sure that everyone that works with me has an external viewpoint. What does this mean? It means I'll talk to someone, they'll say, oh, I'm afraid to talk to I don't want to blog, I like to do my work, and this is how I should be valued on my work. And I always tell them, no, you have to be in the outside world. Talking to people, studying things, networking. No, but I am an introvert. And because I'm an introvert, I don't feel comfortable. And I tell them, well, I'm an introvert too. Who is an introvert here? There, thank you. So there's so many introverts, but your job is not to be an introvert. Your job is to connect with the world. And every person that I can do that with discovers that there are people better than themselves. And in that process, they begin to reason that they have to work in competition with the outside world. But I would tell you, for people who are stuck inside this bubble, it's impossible to teach them how to reach above their own rank. And it's hard in an organization to move these people, I know. Questions are gone. Okay, so why did I begin to think about this user experience question? Because I heard the word UX everywhere. UX, UX, UX. I want to understand it. So by working in investing, I began looking at the pattern of investment. I was looking at how many startups that were co-founded by designers or founded by designers were acquired by technology companies. And I made this graph. And the graph is interesting because there wasn't a lot of acquisition activity. There are companies like YouTube, Flickr, also Android was co-founded by designers. But there wasn't a lot of M&A activity. But in the year 2009, something magical happened. There was a there was a mobile app called Mint. It was a personal financial management system. And after it was acquired, I noticed that there were all these companies that were co-founded by designers that just blew up. Why is that? It's because in my analysis, if you are a company that was founded before 2008 or 2009, you are heavily disadvantaged because you still live in the era of desktop computing, and that's what defined you. if you are a startup that was founded after 2008, 2009, after the iPhone took off, you have the advantage because you have no legacy of desktop, number one. And number two, you are accustomed to working with consumers with higher taste and experience. So the design of your experience is going to be better than if you're a company made before 2008, 2009. And people say to me, well, that's a mobile phone, so the mobile phone is a special thing. It's not true. If you look back to history, many technologies had these moments. For instance, the automobile. So the blue line is the number of cars acquired per family in the United States in the early 1900s. But what happened is there was a kind of dip, a moment where people were not buying cars. So what did, at the time, the largest car company in the world, General Motors, do? They hired a chief designer, a vice president of design, Harley Earl. He was the first vice president of design in corporate America. He was the Johnny Ive of Apple, basically. And he had this idea that he would make these cars so much more exciting looking. You know, with fins, like rocket fins, or like with chrome, so it was shiny. And that was good. Sales picked up. But that wasn't enough. Also, what happened at the same time in the United States, President Eisenhower put in what's called the Interstate Highway Act, connecting roads across America so you could travel long distances. What happened because of this is that when you had a car, the car had to go long distances because you're traveling with the family. So it had to be comfortable. The car also is a symbol of who I am. So how it looked or felt was important. So if you think about it, it's no different in this mobile phone era. The exact same thing has happened. Why do you need a curved screen? I don't know. Like, why does it have to be like a wedge, whatever, with like, you know, like aluminum? Or I don't know. It's the same computer. We're using this kind of aesthetic design to make it more interesting. We're improving the user experience, which is the interior of the car. It's like leather seats, you know, a cup holder for your drink, like a car. But these things alone are not enough. Again, interstate highway produced more usage. And so mobile phones have produced more usage. So I ask anyone who's interested in this to study it carefully because the automobile revolution is very similar to what's happened now. But this time it's very different because the automobile involves our physical transportation. Whereas the phone, the computer, is like, as Steve Jobs said famously, the computer is a bicycle for the mind. So it speeds up the speed of our mind. Questions to come. All right. Okay, whoa, this is good, exciting. Okay, so Moore's Law again. Moore's Law means the doubling of transistors. 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 128. It's a big deal. It's a small number, right? Now, if you think of that laid out on a chessboard, it's very interesting. Let me double all the numbers and show you what happens. So if you just go across a chessboard, halfway through a chessboard, and look at how the numbers grow, it's quite powerful. So that's already at 32,000. This is already at 83, 80 million. And now we're at 2 billion. That is measuring from 1970 to 2017. Now let's go forward in 30 years. What happens is the numbers, of course, keep doubling. So when we talk about machine intelligence, why people think it's going to happen, it's because this number of transistors, or this power, is difficult to fathom. It is not 1,000, million, trillion, or quadrillion, or quintillion. So it's 9 quintillion times faster and more expansive. Our children, or our grandchildren, can expect to be commonplace. This era is happening right now, and that is what is so unusual today. So, go to questions. So I got through the first one. I've already talked a bit about end-ups. Questions. Is leadership teachable in class, or is it only, I don't think it's an innate skill. It's definitely, and it's not teachable in the class. Sorry, I didn't mean to you. I mean, I used to be an academic, and I don't believe in the academy. Not in a class. It's not innate. It has to happen in practice, and it can only be learned through failure. So who, as a leader, has failed miserably? Me. Yeah. It's terrible, right? It hurt, right? It was good. See, someone who comes at the end can say it's good, but when they were there, it was bad. Leadership requires a kind of social punishment, because only through that can you smell how bad things can get. You know how you can read the latest book or the latest essay from HBR or the latest leadership legends that are, it's so beautiful. It never tells you that the leader was crushed to the bone and bleeding on the ground. It never tells you the bad part of leadership. Leading means you will fail miserably. Who would teach that in a class? You wouldn't pay for the class, right? And you can't simulate this terrible experience. So you have to learn it in practice. And if you're lucky to learn it and you experience failure, you should be excited, as you were saying. It was really good because you got data. Anyone who loves science knows they need data. You have a hypothesis, you have to experiment, and you get data. A leader only gets to get data when they're leading. Okay, next question. Design thinking courses, hype or must? Hype, kind of must. Next question. Donald Trump, hero of, complex. Next question. Kim Jong-un, next question. How to scale the concept of empathy? Very simple. Again, going back to my point 3, it's about inclusivity. Only through including someone who is different than yourself can you have empathy for them. Now, I just gave a speech at a big commencement in the United States where I talked about this thing that I care about, inclusivity. Because they gave me an honorary degree. You know, it's like, wow, honorary degree, you know, like, wow. So I said, I must be so smart because I have an honorary degree, you know, and I'm I'm a man, I can think so well. I can design all kinds of things. But the last thing you want me to design is a tampon. You know a tampon? I'm a man. I don't have that part. I'm a terrible person to commission to design this kind of product. But it happens all the time. Men design all kinds of products for women, not knowing how it is to be a woman. And this is the fundamental problem today, is that we believe we are so smart that we have empathy for that person. I know exactly how that person feels. You don't. You don't at all. Number one. Number two, the worst thing is not knowing how they feel. You are not accountable for their problem. You get to make a solution, and you hope it works well for them, and you get to leave. So empathy is about recognizing that you do not have the answer to everything because you are a certain type of person. Number two, empathy is, are you accountable for that product or not? And that'll change your life. Again, I'm not preaching to you. I learned this because I didn't know this for so long. I was designing for so long, not understanding this important property. I was speaking to many audiences, not thinking about your questions. So it is part of my own journey. Next question. Who inspires you the most? Mainly dead people. Because every time I'm inspired by someone, that person's dead. And that's the best way. Next question. How to best implement continuous design? It depends what you mean by design. To me, design means working with real customers. So the best way to implement it is to ensure that all of your team members are working with real customers. Why will they not do this? Because they're busy. I'm just too busy. You laugh, it happens, right? I'm just too busy. I'm just busy. It's not my work, you know? You have to break them of that. It's very hard. Okay, so end-ups are still as relevant as startups. So who works at an end-up? Come on, raise your hand. Oh, end-up people, I love you. So I worked at end-ups for most of my life. And I will tell you that an end-up is the best place to be because you learn how to give structure to what would normally be chaos. So who's at a startup? Startup people? Startup? Okay, good. Chaos, right? It's chaos. Some days you wish it had less chaos. You wish it had more structure. So it's two sides of a coin. So why do I find design and art useful in this context? It's because most people don't understand the difference between design and art. Because the reality is that they are two different things. If you are French, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you are not French, it's very hard, I found out. Because designers are not artists. Designers make solutions, and artists make questions. And it is the synergy of these two types of people that produce amazing things. The same way with engineers solve problems, and scientists ask questions. When scientists and engineers collaborate, amazing things happen. So let me give an example. So many of you have heard of this typeface, Comic Sans. Some of you who are in design make jokes about this typeface. Comic Sans, a stupid typeface. You know, it hurts my eyes are bleeding. It's a very common joke for this typeface. Now, what I want to note is that design is about form and content. And so when you think about the form of Comic Sans, what does it look like? It looks like handwriting, right? It's a handwriting. It's not geometric. It's not too traditional. It's handwriting, like somebody wrote it with their hand. That's a form. And then when you think about content, you want to know, what is this typeface good for? Why would you use this font? And the answer is in the name, comics. If you use Comic Sans for comics, it is the best font ever. Let me give you an example. So here we have a mouse saying, "Holy moly, Catman, use your utility belt in Helvetica." A little bit strange. Now you have your medicine bottle in Comic Sans. The medicine bottle looks a little scary, right? But if you change typefaces, it's okay. Do you see? The person in the comics is talking comic language, and the person taking the medicine is having a very sterile typeface, safe. And so design is about matching the form with the content. Designers are the best at finding this fit between these two sides. Now, when you think about art, art is so much harder. Again, you are in France, so you don't have a problem with art. I will tell you that everywhere I go, CEOs will tell me, "I love design, but I can't stand art. I don't understand art." And I tell them that if you don't understand art, then you understand art. Because art is about the enigma. It's the unexplored. It's the I don't know. And because I ran an art school, I enjoyed the enigmas I would find. You know, as a leader, as a president, I would find signs on campus. You know, signs, they say, "Don't do this." So as a new leader, I was wondering what I was saying. So I showed up and I would look at this wall, and the wall says, "Bicycles secured to handrail are subject to removal without notice." I looked at the place. I could fit 5 bicycles here. And so somebody wrote, "Why?" I was wondering, why? So I would always walk by it and wonder why it was this way. And then a week later, I noticed someone tore down the sign because there was a debate. Why? Why not? Right? And so I think art is like this. Art has this power. Art is mysterious, like glass you can't drink, or your boyfriend broken into 2 pieces. Like, why would you do this? Why would you make a bed the perfect size of your body? Why? Only artists do this work. Now, but I remember when I had surgery, I had an operation. And what happened is I was out and I woke up, right? So I had the surgery done. I woke up. The doctor is standing there, and he says, you know, when we opened you up, it wasn't what we expected. So we got creative on you. And I said, don't get creative on me. Right? So you want art, all this mystery, when it's about something you don't understand, but when it's your body or your finances, no innovation. Because it's creative and they're safe. And so a leader has to balance creative and safe. And the problem with the end up is you tend too much time in safe. And the problem in a startup is you tend too long in creative. So it's the combination of these two things. Okay, back to questions. Back to questions. Back to questions. There we go. Okay, some more questions. Thanks. Okay, redesigning leadership requires to know why it needs to be changed. What is your view? It's very hard. Because most people don't want to change. Because they like being where they are. I think Dan Ariely's talk covered this really well. Again, the only thing you can do as a leader is to expose people to the outside world. And in doing so, they notice these things. If they stay in their cubicle, if they stay in their own world, they will never change. So I recommend field trips as much as you can. Next question. Can you describe inclusion? Well, they say that diversity is inviting you to the party. Inclusion is asking you to dance. So I like this definition. Again, you should always ask yourself how to be more inclusive. Not just to be a good person, but to be an effective business leader in technology today. Next question. Is new design leadership compatible with classical management? Absolutely. I'm sure you all love Peter Drucker, right? So Peter Drucker's, all of his quotes, sayings are a combination of linear thinking and nonlinear thinking. It isn't a new thing, design leadership. Next question. Has leadership fundamentally evolved over the past years? Well, it has to, because of Moore's law. Next question. What are you expected from tomorrow's startup leaders from an investor's point of view? I think startup leaders have to talk to end-up leaders. Because there's a lot of wisdom in some of these end-up leaders. So as an investor, I would ask, how many major CEOs do you know? Because if you think you know everything, then you will die. Next question. What is designers for you today, and what about design is about inclusion today and in tomorrow? Because the world of technology has become exclusive. It excludes people. Do you know how Google, when it launched Google Photos, using machine intelligence, great service, right? Google Photos, it's so intelligent. So Google Photos, when it first launched, it automatically tags things, right? Oh, this is a car, this is a dog, this is whatever. Google Photos, when it launched, if you have dark skin, it would mark you as a gorilla. It's true. It was a terrible thing. Why? It's because Google's machine intelligence used data from a biased data set that only had faces of white people. So this is an example of terrible business decisions that happen when you don't consider inclusivity because you just narrow your market size. Okay, next question. Do you have concrete tips for operational team to work more responsibly? First of all, you should eat food with them whenever possible because they will associate you with something delicious. Very important. Oh, we're back here. Okay, 1 minute and 28 seconds left. So this chart is available online at one of my sites. I think if you Google it, I'll put it on Twitter later. So I was at an art school, and I was fortunate because one of the graduates was Joe Gebbia, the co-founder of Airbnb. And he would always say to the students, take the next step. And every time I saw students, I would tell them, Joe says, take the next step. But I realized as a leader, you say all these things, but you have to take your own advice. So after 6 years there, I packed up the president's house, and I went to Silicon Valley to work in venture capital. And I remember my first week, I was in the first meeting, I thought, wow, they're watching CNN, right? But that's actually Al Gore. So I was like, whoa, a different world. And I love the investing world because I met so many interesting people. And if you are not involved in investing, I strongly encourage you to get involved in the investment world because it moves at a speed that I never imagined, and you meet so many new interesting people in the process. 20 seconds left. Okay, all kind of industries. Startups and end-ups. I have this chart online. Startups tend to want to be something, but an end-up is already something. A startup is agile, and end-up is stable. A startup has little to lose. An end-up has everything to lose. It is this dichotomy that slows end-ups down. It's this dichotomy that makes startups move too fast and do dumb things and don't work inclusively. I'm up on time. Thank you very much.